Hi, Randy Stiefer here with another Gear Talk video. Today I'm going to be covering wide-angle zooms for Canon APS-C cameras for video. This is a unique topic because, well, there are a lot of wide-angle zooms for Canon in general. There's really only two that are specifically good for video. The first one of those lenses is actually a Canon product. It's the Canon EFS 10 to 18mm f4.5 to 5.6 IS STM lens, and thankfully I did not pass out reading that long ass name. But don't worry, the next lens is even longer. The big thing that jumps out about this lens to you right away is the fact that it's just $279, which is, you know, one of the cheapest lenses you'll ever buy. That's a zoom. It's got good image quality. It's image stabilized, which is one of the criteria used for picking these lenses. If they weren't image stabilized, I didn't even consider them, because Canon does not put image stabilization in any of its bodies. You really have to have the image stabilization in the lens for it to work well for video. Bonus, this lens has an STM motor, as you heard in the name, and what that is a silent motor that drives the focus system, so that way you don't hear the motor while you're recording video. Again, it's got great image quality for its price. I'm not saying it's got L series quality, but it's pretty darn good for $279. Another thing to consider with this lens is that it's small and light. So if you're going to be doing a lot of, backpacking and you need a ultra wide zoom, this is a great choice because it's not going to weigh you down. It's also going to be nice on your pocketbook for a second time because it's a 67mm filter thread, which is going to cut the cost of any filters you want for this. And in video, you need neutral density filters. There's a card right here. Go check out my video about neutral density filter. But this camera uses 67mm filters, which is about 40% cheaper than 77mm filters. So it saves you money when you buy it, and it saves you money when you buy the neutral density filters that you're going to need for it. Now here's the one thing that should give you pause on buying this lens. It has a relatively slow aperture. 4.5 to 5.6 is slow. And this could leave you pushing the ISOs higher than you want to when you're shooting in low light. Canon, not the greatest at low light when it comes to their APS-C cameras. Their full frame cameras knock it out of the park on that, but their APS-C sensor cameras are about a stop behind a lot of other cameras. So that's kind of important, something to consider. But if you've got a $300 budget, this is the lens for you. Now your other option for a wide angle zoom for Canon APS-C cameras is from Tamron. It's a 10 to 24 f3.5 to 4.5 DI 2 VC HLD zoom lens. Excuse me while I pass out. This one's still a relative bargain at $499. It has VC, which is Tamron speak for image stabilization. And it also has an HLD motor, which is a new kind of motor, but it's supposed to be silent just like the STM motor. So that way, you get autofocus in your video without hearing the autofocus motor. Now this lens, and I qualified the last lens with saying it has great image quality for the price. This lens just has great image quality, period, full stop, end of discussion. In the center of the lens, it's one of the sharpest lenses I've ever seen, and the edges perform perfectly acceptable. At all focal lengths, this lens is 2/3 of the stop faster than the Canon lens, which is something to consider because Canon's about a stop behind when it comes to noise compared to other cameras, so that 2/3 faster pretty much makes up for all that. Another advantage this lens has over the Canon is it has a wider focal range. The Canon lens only goes to 18, this one goes out to 24. If you're shooting video, you're wide most of the time anyway. I shoot on 18 to 55 and I'm always usually between 18 and 24. So if you've got a 10 to 24, you're almost never going to have to change lenses. If you got a 10 to 18, you might have to change to your kit lens you probably bought with the camera sometimes. So I would definitely, if I had the extra $200, I would definitely get this lens over the Canon, because that way it could pretty much live on my camera when I'm shooting video. And the last reason to consider getting this lens is something that Canon has caused themselves. Canon's only 4K camera body, the Canon 5D Mark IV, and we're probably going to be pretty safe to assume future editions, because the 1D Mark II, which I don't even consider because that camera's for professional sports shooters, and it just happens to shoot 4K, does it well. Both those cameras have a 1.7 crop factor, so that means they're actually shooting with a space on the sensor that's smaller than APS-C. But because Canon has two different mounts, they have the EFS mount and the EF mount, Canon APS-C lenses like the 10 to 18 will not go on the 5D Mark IV, even though you're shooting with such a small portion of the sensor that the image circle from that lens would cover what you're shooting with. So third-party manufacturers like Tamron, they don't bother with an EFS mount on their APS-C lenses. They just put an EF mount on. So this Tamron 10 to 24, if you decide later on to upgrade to a 5D Mark IV, will fit on it just fine, and then you've got a 10 to 24 video lens for your 5D Mark IV. So there's another big consideration. If you're planning to eventually upgrade to a full-frame Canon camera that shoots 4K, this lens is a great choice because you'll still be able to use it to shoot video when you move up. There you go. You can either get the Canon 10 to 18mm at $279, a good choice, great bargain, or you can get the Tamron 10 to 24, a little more expensive, better image quality, faster f-stop, and you can use it on the 5D Mark IV if you decide to upgrade later. Those are your two choices for ultra-wide angle zooms for Canon APS-C cameras, and I hope this has been helpful for you. For future Gear Talk videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, that way you don't miss any of them. Till next time, I'm Randy Stiefer. Life is short, do what you love.